Hello and welcome to The Engine Room, the podcast where we explore the trends, insights and ideas that are shaping the future of B2B marketing. I'm your host, Laura Pearsall, and today I've got someone different joining me. Our regular co-host, Christine Clancy, is away travelling. So today I've got our head of IT here at Prime Creative Media, Chris Forrest. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Laura. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. So I think a reasonable question that people might have is, what is a head of IT doing here on a B2B marketing podcast? And I think when I pitched you the idea of you coming on the pod initially, I sort of said, we need this to be a bit of a therapy session between marketers and their dashboards. You know they drive me crazy. You know I'm in with you quite a lot trying to understand what is going on with our data. And that's what I wanted to bring you in here for. What do you think you're going to be able to take us through today, Chris?
Really, the aim is just to go over the different systems, why they don't necessarily all interconnect as neatly as we would all love them to, and then some of the issues and pitfalls and just sort of a general overview and how to sort of help shape the way that you approach data.
Okay, fantastic, because I know I definitely have some frustrating moments with data, and I'm sure our other B2B marketers listening today have their own frustrations as well. So I've sort of broken it up into three key areas I want us to discuss today. So we're going to be looking at why your numbers might not be matching up between different dashboards and different reporting sources, and why that's actually normal. It's not necessarily a problem. I also want us to look at what's really happening behind data. So where it breaks, how tracking works, including looking at things like bots, autoclicks, attribution gaps, all of that fun stuff that we're all dealing with these days. And also, I wanted to round out the conversation by looking at what marketers should focus on instead, moving away from this idea of chasing perfect numbers, these unicorn matching numbers that all align perfectly, to really moving towards, I guess, understanding trends, context, and real business impact of our marketing, which as B2B marketers is really what we all need to be thinking about. All right, Chris, so let's dive in. And I think a sensible place to start is a question that we often hear from clients. It's a question that I often come to you with, a question that our team members come to you with. They'll say things like, I'm looking at Google Analytics, I'm looking at the report from my email sending platform. The numbers aren't matching up. My email sending platform is telling me I've got this many clicks, but then when I look at the actual page reference, the clicks are completely different. Why does that happen?
Yeah, so really what's happening there is these different platforms measure different things. They're slightly varied in the way that they're measuring and tracking things. So the end result just doesn't really line up. So email inboxes restrict some of the information that analytics is relying on. So typically you would see more clicks in an email platform than you would see in analytics, right? And on the analytics side, Google has just more information to work with. And so they're able to be stronger in their restrictions in terms of filtering out what they believe is what they term as non-human traffic. Your bots, for example.
Okay, so Google is able to figure that out a lot better than an email sending platform can. Okay, and that's something that we've spoken about quite a lot, and something that we do see quite a lot, particularly in B2B marketing, is a lot of auto clicks that we see. Now, in the B2B industry, in various B2B industries, what we find is that we're obviously sending to business accounts, we're sending emails to business accounts. There's very strict software that is screening and checking the emails that come into the inboxes associated with corporate accounts. You've explained that to me a few times. Can you explain it to our listeners a bit as well?
Yes, 100%. So speaking as the head of IT, we are really concerned about emails because from the IT perspective, it is one of the largest vulnerabilities for a business, right? It's something that all of our users, we're responding to, we're open to. The salespeople get emails out of the blue, and we need to make sure that those emails are valid and they're not malicious. They're not going to hack our stuff, right? So that's the IT hat. How do you do that, right? The way that you do that is you check these links. before you let people open them. So I'm sure a number of our audience, they've got systems of their own and they'll have a link and they're used to seeing a redirect or a check or whatever the way the system is exactly implemented. The problem comes in is that, to put it sort of high level, if I was a hacker, I only want to hack real people. So if it was really easy to tell that a security system wasn't real, and it wouldn't be a good security system because the hacker just wouldn't hack it, right? They would just let that one go, and then they'd just hack the real person. So these security systems need to be as realistic as possible, which unfortunately means it's really hard to tell them apart from our actual real human traffic. So your email platforms do have a lot of difficulty in some instances determining whether this was an auto-click or whether this was a real person.
And that is kind of where a lot of frustration comes in reporting. And we certainly see it with clients as well, where, there's the variation, and I guess there's a desire to understand, what's an auto click and what's a real click. But are you sort of saying that these email sending platforms are dealing with an almost impossible task to try and figure that out?
Yeah, they really are. And it's not a task that's static either, right? The
goalposts are moving all the time.
Exactly. They are always moving.
The hackers get smarter.
Yep.
And we just have to try and figure out a way to keep up.
Yeah, exactly. So the hackers get smarter. The security systems have to become more realistic in response. And so the marker that your email platform system determined and worked out to say, hey, we've finally worked out how to determine this was an auto click. Well, the hacker also picked that up. So the security system removed it. And now you're back to square one and it starts all over again. And the goalposts just shift and shift.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do to try and navigate around this is to try and, I suppose, with our email numbers, take them with a bit of a grain of salt and understand that there is some auto clicks in there, that it is almost impossible to filter out, but then really put a bit more stock in the numbers that we're seeing on the analytics side, which you sort of told us are a bit more reliable and a bit more trustworthy. Well, not necessarily trustworthy, but they have a better way of screening out bot clicks and things like that versus our email sending platforms. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, definitely. So Google Analytics, just because they're able to track the user a bit longer on the page, which really helps in determining, like these security systems I'm talking about, they just need to check the page. They don't need to spend, 2 minutes reading an article. So if somebody's spending 2 minutes reading the article, Google's really able to work out, well, actually that was somebody real.
That's real.
Right?
That's legit.
That's legit. They've got more data to work with. There is a little bit of caveat that I will say in that Google itself is not perfect, but they are the best at it in the business.
Okay, that's a good one to know. That's a good one to remember. So Google is the best in the business at filtering out bots, sort of not real activity.
Yes.
Okay, good to know. That's helpful. Do you think as marketers, sometimes we expect a little bit too much from the data and the information that we can pull from these sources? Like, what's the IT take on that?
You're going to get me into trouble.
You can be honest. Tell us what you really think.
So I think it comes in two parts. I think there's a tendency to get too lost in the minutiae of the data. And when you analyze any data set, even analytics, too finely, you start picking up and noticing those bits of imperfections that even analytics has. And then there's a temptation of coming to IT and, can we filter this out? Or can we do this? Or can we? And that is where it sort of goes a little bit of a step too far in sort of from my perspective. The overall data, the consistency, the trends, the flows, the more analytics we do on that sort of a little bit more of a macro scale, I think the better. It's just when you get lost in the minutiae that we sort of just get lost in being like, okay, yes, I can definitely see that in this instance that we've manually reviewed and we've pulled stats from here and stats from here and stats from here, that figure probably isn't right. But there's not much I can do to change that particular figure. But let's have a look at, okay, well, we've worked out there's a ratio here, or there's just like a trend that we can see that over the course of looking at this for a month, we can roughly work out, because we've done the analytics to really fine level, about, I don't know, let's say 5% of that traffic was probably, in all likelihood, not real traffic. Well, let's just then have a look at that and see how that applies to the scale of the traffic. Does that make the numbers line up better if we're, doing some correlation to the data series over the course of time?
Okay. So what I'm hearing, digital traffic is not perfect.
Never is.
One of the things that we can do as marketers to get some better insights and maybe reconcile the fact that the data's not perfect and the numbers don't always align is to zoom out and look at things from that macro level.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Good to know. And what about things like privacy changes? We know that that is sort of coming in quite a lot. Cookies, tracking limitations. How do you keep on top of an environment that's constantly changing?
Well, it's with difficulty. It is particularly for those of us who are working in a more global space. It is another further level of challenge. But if we just look at the general infrastructure, effectively what happens is Google Chrome is the most popular browser on the internet. Some of the other browsers are built off of Google Chrome. So your Microsoft default browser is also a Chrome browser. So anything that Google Chrome rolls out basically becomes the standard for security and privacy across the entire space. So to take the cookie example, Google Chrome rolled out, no more third-party cookies, right?
And so we all had to just jump in line.
Yep. Google says jump and we all have to jump, right? Because they just have that market share. So that from like a macro trend, that's mostly dealt with by your tracking companies, the analytics companies, and the IT team, right? So your email sender will be making these adjustments. Analytics will be making these adjustments. So from a marketing point of view, I wouldn't worry too much about that necessarily. You do have, however, a rise in ad blockers historically. So if you think, way back, no one was running an ad blocker. You didn't need it, right? As things have gone on, more people have been running ad blockers. It's not that easy of a stat to get because ad blockers pretty much mostly block the systems that would work out if they are an ad blocker, if that makes sense, right? They're blocking the things that will determine, hey, are you running an ad blocker? So it's not an easy stat to pin. But in Australia, it's probably just north of 40% of all traffic is running an ad blocker.
Yeah, it's significant.
It's significant.
Especially for B2B marketers.
It is. And it actually is probably worse than you immediately think. Because when people say ad blockers, I'm sure the instinct is, that just, stops this ad popping up. I don't want to see this pop-up ad, or I don't want to see this MREC. It just hides all of that. It also hides and blocks tracking, right? So the people who actually built these ad blockers, they expanded the scope beyond just, the titular blocking of ads to also blocking tracking. So if I'm running an ad blocker, analytics is not going to see me, right? So when you're looking at traffic and patterns in analytics, some of that could be just invisible to you.
Yeah, right. So because as a result of ad blockers, we're actually missing out on some of the traffic that might be happening. So not only do we have things like inflated traffic as a result of bots and things like that, we also have traffic that's not even showing up at all because of ad blockers.
Exactly.
It's certainly quite a lot that we have to deal with and navigate with. I wouldn't mind putting a pin there and actually moving on to the topic of bots and I sort of touched on it and I really want to delve in a little bit deeper here because I think it's something that we're all dealing with. And I know other B2B marketers are dealing with rises in traffic as a result of bots. Now, the default assumption has always been bots equal bad, equal not a good thing. We want to avoid that. But something that you and I have spoken about a lot lately is the idea that not all bot traffic is bad. Some of it is actually good and some of it we want to have. Can you talk our listeners through a little bit more around that and the kind of bot traffic that is actually really useful and beneficial for people, particularly if you're a B2B marketer?
100%. So bot traffic, it's become a pejorative. Some of the times IT talks about it, we are like, oh my God, these bots.
Are you just sick of us coming and asking you,
No,
you know, and just sort of saying, we've seen all this bot traffic, why can't you exclude it? What's going on?
It's not even really that. It's, sometimes we have bots that just crash the site.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
And that's frustrating from the IT perspective because we're like, this perfect site and now you just come along and ruined it. So slight tangent, history lesson. I think this will be really useful to just put things in perspective. When the internet was first made, URLs didn't exist. Everything was just a series of numbers that you would enter in. That was a unique identifier. We came along with URLs and I was like, great. How the hell did you work out what the URL was? Like, how did you work out that this was the URL that you'd want to do? So people started creating a page that would just list all of the interesting sites or URLs to go to.
Oh, so it was kind of like
Right?
an index
It
of
was an
every
index.
website in the world.
No, it was an index of things that people found.
Yep. Okay.
And then finally, we had people come along to crawl the internet using a bot to then be able to have a search, right? And really Google mastered this. And that is Google, right? There is a Google bot. That Google bot crawls every single website it can. And if that bot doesn't crawl your site, you are not on Google.
Yep.
And if
you are not on the internet.
You are not on Google, you're not on the internet, and you have serious problems from a marketing point of view. You can send all the emails you want in the world, you are getting no organic traffic, right? So just fundamentally, there are bots that are really valuable and they perform a valuable service.
Yep.
With the rise in AI, we now have a lot more bots on the market. A lot more bots are requiring that real-time data. Because if you go back 5 years, really a lot of it was these search indexing bots, right? The people are trying to find you so you can be on Google or, Bing or Yahoo or what have you. Now they're trying to look at your site, analyze your site, get it into the AI model so that when people ask them, they can use that data. So to bring that from that sort of like higher level, just like in theory, I can speak very specifically for Prime. We like the AI bots being on our site. And the reason we like our AI bots being on our site is we believe that brings value to our clients, right? So as we're writing stories, as we have, interviews and everything else, we think having that as part of the model is really valuable because it is a positive perspective that we're able to have for the industry, advocating for the industry, going out. And so when somebody says, tell me about Rio Tinto, some of that response is influenced by the work that we're doing on, say, Australian mining.
Yep.
Right? And if every site that had this wonderful story to tell and had this valuable insight and contribution just said, no, I don't want bots. I don't want AI bots. I'm sick of this traffic. Let's just block it all. The only information that these bots would be working from are more dubious sources like Reddit and Twitter and some of these other more negative influences and often just like incorrect, just bad information.
Yep. Untrusted
sources. So nowadays, yes, I understand the frustration from a marketing point of view of this is messing with my data.
Yep.
I need to get clean data and it's more fuzzy now really than it was like 5 years ago, right? There is a little bit more for marketers to be aware of and the numbers just aren't as rigid as they were. But if you just opt out of it entirely, you're just leaving all of the infrastructure and all these people who are now more and more being driven to AI alone. And
Exactly.
You're ignoring them.
Yeah, I think the unlock there is this idea that, I think a previous thinking was maybe that it's only human traffic that we want. Human traffic is the only way to influence people in B2B marketing, to influence purchasing decisions, whereas actually it's the other way around now. bot traffic can actually help influence and get your message out there, because ultimately it does teach these large language models, which in reality is where a lot of people are going to research purchasing decisions now.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I wanted to ask, like as you were talking, I was thinking you obviously would have quite a bit of visibility of, say, the bot traffic that we would have seen from search engines before scraping our sites versus the bot traffic we now see from large language models scraping our sites. What do you think the kind of variation is between the two? Like, could you put it in a percentage, or is it that the large language models are scraping at a much higher level than, say, Google now? Where does that all fit?
So before the rise of ChatGPT, bots were pretty tame. You know, they came along your site, they would swing by like once a month. They'd say, hey, what's new?
Yep.
Right? And then they'd add it to the search indexes. As your site, got more popular, it would happen more often because, Google, particularly for new sites or people who had more current topics, Google would just check in more and more just to make sure that your organic search actually is reflecting, most up-to-date things. But there wasn't a demand for like right away data. That's really changed. So the better the models, let me rephrase that. The models work the best with the most data. So as they are training these models, they want the most up-to-date data, and there are a lot of AI companies in the market at the moment. There are a lot of competitors. They are swinging by more and more and more. They want more data. And the other thing that is impacting us is the rise of a system like Perplexity. So Perplexity uses AI and search, where the search they're using Google search to find all the sites, and then they're using AI to sort of dive in and pull it all out and then be able to present that back to the user. So we are getting sort of this bot traffic that is directly actually being used to generate a response for a user. That didn't happen 5 years ago. It just wasn't, something that was possible.
Okay, but break it down for me. Where do they sit compared to each other? Google versus the AI bots. Google bots versus AI bots.
So search indexing bots, not just Google, they would have been, let's just say that they were ticking along. AI bots come in, it's at least like 15 times more.
15 times more, you reckon?
At least.
Yeah, okay.
It's just really spiked.
Yep. And would that be in the last is that the last 12 months? Is it over a longer period than that?
So when ChatGPT 3, that's the one that everyone thinks is like the first ChatGPT.
Yep.
When that came out, it was probably, 2 times. Take like a year after that, we're probably looking at 8 times. A year after that, we're probably looking at sort of 12. And then, if I'm doing my math right, a year after that, which was last year, we were sitting probably at 13, 14. And now I would say we're sort of that 15 mark. So it's really that as everyone jumped in to compete right after ChatGPT, that sort of 2 years, it really spiked.
It's gone through the roof.
Yeah.
It's gone through that. It's that curve, that exponential growth. I think that's really important context setting for everyone today as well, because we do get really fixated on numbers as marketers. It's our job. And I know with all the campaigns I have in market, we're not only helping clients with their campaigns, we also are working on all of our own campaigns. And I know whenever I have live campaigns in the market, I am logging in every morning. I am checking and logging and reporting my numbers every day, checking the dashboards, looking for the trends and the tips. But yeah, it's obviously becoming harder and harder. It's a completely different landscape. And realistically, in 12 months' time, maybe in 6 months' time, it could be a completely different landscape again, couldn't it?
Exactly. And one of the things that is actually important to keep in mind with the bot traffic is they're behaving worse. More like they want to scrape sites, and there was a gentleman's agreement 5 years ago
Yeah.
between all the various IT companies on how to actually be a good bot. That's not really honoured anymore.
Really?
So these bots.
And who was the first person that said, right, I'm ripping up that agreement. We are not doing this anymore? Who started it? Who do we blame?
ChatGPT.
Okay.
But what that means though is they are trying to seem more human to get around blocks.
Yep.
So as remember I mentioned with the email clients that part of the problem was the security systems needed to seem human so that they could, get hacked instead of the actual person, and then stop the actual person from being hacked. The bots, they want to get past restrictions because, there are people out there that don't want bots, or they don't want bots from certain sites. They only let certain things through. And a lot of these bots now, they want to get through regardless. And so that's actually causing more of an issue for analytics and your other, Google Analytics and your other, things that are doing on-page tracking, because these bots are trying to seem more human because they are trying to scrape your site. And that gentleman's agreement, that is out of the window.
Gone.
It is gone.
All right. So for all of our marketers that are pulling their hair out, we're all thinking, we might be feeling a little bit despondent after this conversation and thinking, it's all a mess out there. It's Cowboy Central. How can I actually find things that make sense? What should I actually be focusing on when it comes to data and reporting and understanding what's going on with my marketing activity? What can you recommend for all of us marketers in that position?
So I mentioned before, the macro and the trends is really useful, right? If you're living your life day by day, I'm sorry, but that's just not going to be a very effective insight into how your campaigns are going. You need to spend the time to look at what are the week by week comparisons, what are the quarter by quarter comparisons, what are the year on year comparisons, how are these trends performing? And particularly with day by day stuff, nowadays these systems, they've got so much data. Analytics, the official recommendation from Google is analytics data is good 5 days after it happened.
Right, because there's change. So if I look at, as an example, if I look at analytics and want to understand the traffic that was on a particular URL yesterday,
yep.
I actually am not going to get the most realistic data. I should be looking at, I really need to be pulling those numbers 5 days from now.
Yeah, so like the degree of change shrinks as the days go on. If you're looking at it live, or if you're looking at what did I get an hour ago, that's really not going to be good data. If you're looking at it a day, it's probably like 95% there. But if you've ever looked at analytics and gone, this is my number, and then next week, you look back on the week prior and you're like, how did that number change?
I certainly have.
That's Google having the time to actually go back and be like, you know what? On reflection, that probably was a bot.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So that's a fun little caveat there. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you're living your life day by day, it's not going to do you favors.
And I am not even going to ask you how Google figures that out and the work that goes into actually doing those calculations, because I know I'll get a really long answer and it's going to go straight over my head. So keep moving.
Yes, we'll keep moving. And like UTMs are your friend. Tracking things are your friend. If you've got an IT department, talk to them, get your head around exactly how, because we've been talking in general, like email platforms, and I've just been using analytics because most people use them, but not and everyone's necessarily going to be using Google Analytics. Your different email platforms will have different things directly into relation to exactly how they're tracking. So talk to your IT departments, talk to your email platforms, get your head around exactly where they have their strengths and where some of their weaknesses lie as well, I find is really helpful. And finally, my recommendation would be look at like a month prior, so you've got data all locked in, and really spend the time to work out your correlations. So this is not going to be it's not an exact science, it's a little bit of an art. But if you're able to say, this is what the traffic I got as click-throughs from my email platform, right? This is what it recorded. And this is what analytics recorded. And this is what, if you have a third system or a fourth system, please use them. Use as much of these different touch points as you have and work out your ratios. And say, on average, roughly, say 90% of the clicks from my email platform correlated into what I think probably was real data, right? Do that for all the metrics that you really care about. And then as you go forward, I mean, you can touch back on that like every, 2 quarters, every year, just to make some updates, make some tweaks. But as you go forward and you're more into the, the daily thrust of marketing and you're really hectic and you don't have the time to really dive in and be like, okay, exactly what is this? What exactly is the number? You have these ratios to fall back on and you're able to say, well, 2 days ago, this is what the email platform said. This is what this said. That roughly works out. And that way, if you have something where you're like, well, that number seems really weird.
Yep.
You've actually got a ratio to fall back on. You say, well, normally, I see an 80% drop off, or I see a 70% drop off, or whatever that number actually is.
Well, this is like our tolerance window.
This is
what
the
we
tolerance.
expect to see.
Exactly. I've now got a 50%. So something actually seems to be wrong here, right? And if you're just focusing on the macro, those little percentage changes, you can really worry and stress you out. Whereas if you have, as you say, that tolerance window, you're able to really clearly and cleanly identify, hey, this was my window, this is where I've dropped. And speaking as an IT person, that also helps raise the flags of, oh, well, shoot, that seems to actually be a real problem that I need to address versus, okay, well, that probably is just bot traffic. Let's just have a quick look. On a scan, it seems fine. But if a marketing person is able to come to me and say, no, this is my tolerance window, this is where the historical trend is, what the hell happened here?
Yep.
Right? That really helps be very exact and targeted in when you need to spend the time to dive it in and get exact answers, and when you can, better spent doing or everything else that is part of your job, right? You don't want data to be your entire job.
Absolutely. I think that's really what we wanted to get out of this episode today, and having you on the podcast was we don't really want to be slaves. No one wants to be slaves to their numbers and slaves to the data and the reporting. We have other priorities as B2B marketers. And it takes us, and really just diving in and focusing on those numbers really takes us away from those basics, which are, and we've spoken about them on the podcast before. It is building a really strong, trusted brand position, using trusted media to actually establish that position. Educating. We know that education is so critically important in B2B marketing. So making sure you're educating target customers about what you have to offer them, and really establishing a platform for your frontline selling teams to actually be able to build the relationships that lead to strong sales outcomes, and really generating marketing qualified leads as well. So ensuring that your frontline reps really always do have that strong pipeline from which they can build on. That's what our priority is as B2B marketers, not necessarily making sure our dashboards align perfectly. So let's get back to basics and let's remember what really matters here in what we're doing.
Exactly. And the one thing I'll say is if you put in a little bit of the work and you've got enough confidence in the data to be able to, talk to it, like data will tell you a story. And as soon as you get to the point where, you're comfortable and you're confident in that you're able to present and back that story, well, then you can turn what could be for some marketers a weakness in terms of trying to get your head around all this data into a strength. Because as soon as you're into storytelling, you're right back into the marketing wheelhouse, and you can rely on all of your existing strengths, and that will help, the BDMs. It will help communicate internally, and also help when you're communicating with your clients. Because if you've got a story, a strong, confident, data-backed, but not you're getting lost in it, story to tell them, you're right where you need to be.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. We really appreciate it. I know I have benefited a lot from our conversations about data, and I'm sure our listeners will have as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
All right, now it's time for our campaign of the week, where we highlight a campaign in one of our titles that really stood out for us. So this week, I wanted to talk about Specsavers, a name that many of you will know because they have fantastic brand recognition, not just in the business-to-business market, but obviously in the consumer space as well. But for us here at Prime Creative Media, they are a long-term client that have worked really closely with our magazine, Insight. Now, Insight is a brilliant magazine that we publish, if we do say so ourselves. It's the leading source of information for ophthalmic professionals, and it has been for nearly 50 years now. So it is a really well established position in market, and it's got that trusted position with its core readership as well, sewn up really nicely. Now, what I really love about the partnership between Specsavers and Insight is that it's not a short-term campaign. As I said, we've been working really closely with their team for many years now, and it represents a long-term strategic investment in brand, education, and ultimately actually recruitment, because that's actually really been a core focus of Specsavers' marketing campaign with us. So it's not just about visibility and brand building. It's really about educating optometrists about what it's actually like to work with them as either an employee or even a joint venture partner. And to do this, they do what all of us marketers do so well. They lead with stories. So a big part of the campaign that they run with Insight is their Specsavers Stories series, which our editors and journalists produce as content across the website and also in the magazine. Now, what these profiles do is they highlight real people working within Specsavers, and it takes you through their career journeys, their experiences, and the outcomes they've achieved through their work at Specsavers. So through this content narrative, what you start to get is examples of peer-led storytelling. We've got real-world proof of what it's actually like to work at the business, and content that's really genuinely relevant to the audience. You know, being ophthalmic professionals and optometrists, they're genuinely interested in what it might be like to work at Specsavers. And this is a perfect example of what we talk about all the time within our business, but also on the podcast. It's about showing and not telling. So it's not Specsavers saying we're a great place to work. It's actually optometrists seeing people like them and seeing what's possible in the Specsavers environment. So it's that real sort of case study type narrative that we know is particularly influential with B2B readers. And then beyond that content that they've developed, it's supported with really strong brand activity. So in terms of advertising space, Specsavers invest in full-page print ads. They use premium digital placements like web skins and leaderboards, and they use e-newsletters as well for visibility, for regular visibility every week. And it's all built around the central message of this campaign of growing into your potential. And if you look at the creative, it's very much about career progression, purpose, long-term growth. And we'll share some of these examples in the show notes as well so that you can have a look at them. But it's very much, it's focused on that, like I say, career progression, long-term growth. What can you expect to see out of working with Specsavers? And importantly, this content is all happening in that very specific trusted environment of Insight magazine. So really what we've got here is a combination of the right audience, the right mindset, and a trusted environment. And this is where it ties back to what we've been talking about today. Because if you're just looking at short-term metrics, you might undervalue something like this, but really these elements are actually the core of every B2B marketing campaign, and they certainly should be the core of what we're all doing as B2B marketers. So it's certainly not a clicks overnight campaign. It's not a volume of clicks campaign. It's about, over the long term, building familiarity, building trust, and shaping perception over time. And then what Specsavers do is also direct that audience to take action. So in this case, all of the digital assets go straight through to the recruitment landing page. So it becomes a very clear narrative, and the customer and the reader is very clear on what the intention is. It is understand what it's like to work at Specsavers, learn a little bit more about that environment. If you like the sound of it, come with us, come to our landing page, and we'll guide you through the process to come and work with us. So really, for us, this set campaign is such a great example of education-led marketing and long-term brand building. So two of our absolute fundamentals in B2B marketing that we love to refer back to time and time again. And as I said before, it's using the trusted environment to influence the right audience. As I said, it's not about getting the most number of clicks, but it's about influencing the right people who could potentially come and be Specsavers employees or, as we said, joint venture partners as well even. And another good reminder that I want everyone to take away from that is that sometimes not everything that works is going to show up neatly in your dashboard. The fundamentals are what we always need to keep sight of in a B2B market environment. But that's probably a really good place for us to wrap up this episode. Hopefully, we've made a few of you feel a little bit better about your reporting dashboards and your numbers and getting them to align better today. Or at least we've given you someone new to blame when the numbers don't match. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like and subscribe to The Engine Room on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts as well, or your favourite podcasting platform. And we'll be back in your ears again in a fortnight. Thanks for listening.